Lightning cracks the sky, with thunder, but no rain. It was Halloween night. Two second-grade kids, Mary and Daniel, were in costumes, walking around trick-or-treating together. The year is 1992. The small suburban town of Greendale had houses of mostly old, Victorian, Second Empire architecture. It was dark and cloudy, with a storm coming, and it was only 6 p.m. Both Mary and Daniel were dressed as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Mary was Donatello. Daniel was Leonardo. They were lower-grade, store-bought costumes. Mary asked, "Daniel, can we swing by Ludlow Street? They always give out tons of candy." "Sure," said Dan. "We can swing by the park, then down towards Broadway Street." They made their way with their bags of candy, and as they got closer to the end of the street, towards Broadway, they stopped when something caught their eye. Mary asked, "Daniel, do you ever wonder about that old school?" She pointed towards an old building. He replied, "Yeah, the old Greendale Middle School. It's been closed and shuttered since 1980. According to my parents, anyways. That was before my time." The old school building was long and wide. A brick building of 5 stories built right in the middle of a suburb, surrounded by houses. There were steps up to the school, but a fence had been built around it to keep people from trespassing. In front of the grassy lawn, there were a couple of huge, leafless trees, thin, wild, and wavy branches. The bark was white. Dan said, "That place gives me the creeps. I've heard so many stories about it." It closed for the new location on the highway, by the high school. "I heard of a murder happening there right before." Mary said, "Those are just stories. There's nothing to be afraid of." Dan replied, "Really? I have a dare for you then. Why don't we sneak in? I always wanted to see what it looks like inside." Mary responded, "But what if we get in trouble? Besides, you can't get inside, it's fenced in." But Dan knew of a secret way, in the back, by the old gym. There's a back door to it. The fence is rusted around that part. I think we can get through, Dan said. They went around the house next door, and behind the old school, and to the fence. Currently it was a parking lot that was mostly abandoned once the school closed. Grass was growing in parts around the cracks in the pavement. They walked up to the fence. There was a rusted portion, and under it, the ground was dug out, enough for a child to fit under. Mary said, "There's a hole under that fence that we could fit through. Looks as if a dog or some animal dug through." Mary and Daniel were able to get under and through. Dan wondered if the gym door was locked. He was about to reach the rusted knob of the door, but suddenly it creaked and slightly popped open. Mary said, "I don't like this." Dan reassured her, "We'll just be in there a minute. No worries." They left their candy bags at the door. They went inside the old gym. It definitely hadn't been used in ages. Dust, darkness, and cobwebs were all around. The bleachers sat empty, and the basketball court's hoops were decaying. There was an opening at the end of the court to the hallway. Mary and Daniel both headed that way. They were then in a very long corridor of orange lockers that were faded and covered with dust. Old educational and inspirational school posters of the 70s were hung around. One locker had a Rush poster on it, another a poster of Pink Floyd's The Wall. There was what sounded like a door opening at the end of the hall. Mary said, "There's someone in here with us." Dan replied, "No, there isn't. It's just an old building. There's a lot of pipes in here. It's just in your head. I understand." It is so spooky, but I love it. They walked down the hall and saw a door to an old classroom slightly ajar. They opened the door, which let out a slow creaking sound. They entered the dark, dusty classroom. The teacher's desk was there, and all the students' desks. There was only a bit of light through the windows from the moon. Some of the students' desks still had books, and the back was scattered with various supplies. Mary wondered, why did they leave all this stuff in here? There was no answer. She spoke again. "Daniel, let's go back to where we came from, please. I'm leaving now." Still no answer. She looked around her and realized she was all alone. "Dan, where are you?" She looked ahead at the chalkboard and was suddenly struck motionless. Her eyes were wide and she became pale. She stood there frozen, urinating herself from fear. The chalkboard read, "Dan's dead. I'm coming for you, Mary." She cried, "This isn't funny, Dan, come out." She heard whispers in the closet in the classroom. and saw something move in the crack of the door. She ran as fast as she could through the narrow hallway to the gym. All this time, she could hear something running behind her. The entrance to the gym seemed like forever, but she got in there. She almost tripped, but luckily she regained her balance quickly. She dare not look back. She left the gym, ran to the fence, and went underneath. Getting caught on the fence, she struggled to get out, panting and out of breath. Suddenly, a hand touched her shoulder, and she screamed. She looked up. It was an old man, one of the neighbors. He said, "It's all right. You shouldn't be playing around here. I'll help you out." He got her out from under the fence. Back inside the dark hallway in the school, a figure stood in the dark. It was Daniel. He was laughing. "That was a good one," he said. Suddenly he heard a noise from the classroom again. Curious, he went in and was horrified by what he saw. It was a very old man who was at the teacher's desk. He looked ghastly and dusty with old tattered clothes. The teacher said, "Sit down." Daniel sat down without any thought or control over his actions. The teacher said, "So you like pranks, do you? It's against school policy. You'll be seated here for detention." Daniel asked, "For how long?" The teacher said, "Forever." Years later, in 2020, the old building was slated to be demolished. No one had entered for years. A construction crew worker entered to survey the area. The place was falling apart. Holes in the walls and parts of the ceiling collapsed. The construction worker thought, "I bet no one's been in here for over 20 years. He went down the hallway of lockers to the classroom, with the door still slightly cracked. He opened it and stood in horror at what he saw. It was Daniel, all grown up. He was sitting at the desk, covered in cobwebs and dust, feces surrounding him, and he was nude, long outgrown his clothes and costume. He was practically a skeleton, being so thin and pale, with sunken eyes, staring straight at the chalkboard. The construction worker, alarmed, "What are you doing in here? I'll call an ambulance for you." Daniel whispered, "Please," but couldn't finish the phrase. He collapsed on the desk and turned to dust.